In MMA, titles tend to change hands often, yet over the years a small number of fighters have separated themselves from the pack, going on championship runs that genuinely have fans wondering, can this person be beat? However, all good things must come to an end. So today, we'll be breaking down a few of those historic title reigns and what led to their downfall. There were enough entries to this list for a part 2, which will be coming soon, so apologies if we miss anyone. I'm George, you're watching Fight Game Insider, and in no particular order, this is the top 10 dominant title reigns ended. Number 10, Jose Aldo. One of the best fighters Brazil has ever laid claim to. It all started back in the WEC promotion, with Aldo making his debut on June 1st, 2008 against Alexandre Franca Nogueira, which he won comfortably by stoppage. Over the next few years, Aldo quickly rose through the ranks, compiling an impressive record with notable names such as Cub Swanson, Mike Brown, and Uriah Faber. November 18th, 2009 at WEC 44, Aldo faced the then dominant featherweight champion Mike Brown, putting on a spectacular performance, showcasing his lethal leg kicks and precise striking. He'd ultimately defeat Brown by second-round TKO to become the new WEC featherweight champ, successfully defending his title numerous times against guys like Uriah Faber in the rematch, Manny Gambarian, and Mark Hominick. This would lead to the year 2010, which saw the famous UFC promotion merge, bringing Aldo's title into the new featherweight division. He was subsequently recognized as the first UFC featherweight champion. Aldo continued his dominant reign in the UFC, defending his title against formidable opponents such as Kenny Florian, Chad Mendes twice, Frankie Edgar, and the Korean Zombie. The guy was on fire, riding an 8.5-year-long, 18-fight win streak. This was until December 12, 2015, when he ran into Conor McGregor, who ended it all in just 13 seconds, with one of the most notorious knockouts in MMA history. Over the next few years, Aldo would put together some more wins, accompanied by some losses, never really seeing the success he once accomplished. 2023 would see him induced to the UFC Hall of Fame in a wholesome moment that had fans, including myself, all up in the feels. Number 9, Demetrius Johnson. Demetrius Johnson may be the most criminally underappreciated MMA fighter of all time, initially beating Joseph Benavidez in the finals of a 4-man tournament to determine the inaugural UFC flyweight champion. Johnson would go on to defend his belt 11 times over the next 5 years, in a historic run that may never be matched again. The time frame would see Mighty Mouse set many records, one being his second title defense against John Moraga, where DJ became the first fighter in UFC history to win a fight via armbar from the mounted crucifix position. Another memorable moment came in April 2015 in his 6th title defense, which saw Johnson face Kyoji Horiguchi. In one of the latest finishes in UFC history, he secured a submission victory with just 1 second remaining in the 5th and final round. One of his greatest wins would come against Olympic gold medalist Henry Cejudo in April 2016. Demetrius dominated the fight and secured a first-round TKO, solidifying his status as one of the pound-for-pound best in the world. In a twist of fate, it would actually be Henry who took the title from DJ when they rematched in a close and competitive bout that went to a split decision. The UFC would end up trading Demetrius with one championship's Ben Askren, in a deal unforeseen by anyone. To no surprise, Johnson would go on to become the champ there too. And as for Ben, well, things could have gone better. Number 8, Amanda Nunes. Known to many as the Lioness, Brazil's Amanda Nunes is considered by many as the female GOAT of mixed martial arts. Nunes began her professional MMA career in 2008, but it wasn't until 2011 that she joined Strikeforce, a prominent organization at the time, then moving to Invicta FC, where she'd go 2-2 across both promotions, winning her UFC debut in August 2013. Fast forward 3 years, following a minor setback against Kat Zingano, she'd face Miesha Tate for the Women's Bantamweight Championship. Nunes won the fight via submission in the first round, marking the beginning of her iconic title run. Amanda would defend her title 8 consecutive times over the next 5 years, bringing her win streak to 12, taking out notable names such as Ronda Rousey, Holly Holm, Chris Cyborg, Jermaine Durandamy, and Valentina Shevchenko twice. 2018 would see her pick up her second strap when she steamrolled the then featherweight champ Chris Cyborg to become the first ever women's double champion. Putting together a regular routine of defending each bet back-to-back, she'd ultimately become the most decorated double champ in UFC history, regardless of gender. In a shock upset for the ages, Nunes would suffer a second-round submission defeat at the hands of Juliana Pena, an L she'd get back in the rematch. Still in her prime, the Lioness would go on to claim one more victim before sailing off into the sunset of retirement. What a career! Do we ever see her return? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Number 7, Matt Hughes. Widely regarded as one of the greatest welterweights in the history of the sport, Matt would make his UFC debut in 1999. After going 2-1 in his first 3 fights with the promotion, Hughes would be paired up against Carlos Newton for the welterweight belt, a fight which he'd win via second-round TKO. Matt went on to secure 5 straight title defenses, before dropping it to lightweight prodigy BJ Penn via first-round submission. After bouncing back with a UD win less than 6 months later, Hughes was thrown back in for the title, this time against none other than George St-Pierre, who at the time was busy crafting his own legacy. With literally 1 second to go in the first round, Hughes would lock in a super tight armbar, forcing a tap and snatching the title back from the Canadian. Matt would put together a 6-fight win streak, including redemption over BJ Penn before losing to St-Pierre in redemption of his own. From here, Matt would bounce between wins and losses before tragically being hit by a train, leaving him with lasting physical and neurological injuries, which unfortunately put an untimely end to his career. After years of rehabilitation, he's now regained a decent quality of life, still attending UFC events to this day, which I love to see. He was also inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame, and rightfully so. Number 6, Israel Adesanya. Entering the UFC, an 11-0 prospect, Israel Adesanya was one to watch, coming from an extensive kickboxing background which saw him achieve championship status. Putting together a solid 5-fight win streak in the promotion, Adesanya would find himself in an interim middleweight title shot against Kelvin Gastelum. This bout would be an absolute barn burner and went on to become a fight of the year. The contest itself was competitive, with both fighters having their fair share of success. Izzy would pull ahead and almost get a late finish, earning him the interim strap despite being the toughest challenge of his career. Just 6 months later, he'd unify the belts with then undisputed champ Robert Whittaker in what was at the time the biggest combat sports event in Australasian history. With a dominant knockout finish, Israel had truly cemented himself as the new dog in the yard. After securing back-to-back wins against Yoel Romero and Paulo Costa, Adesanya would dare to be great as he moved up in weight division to fight Jan Blachowicz. Unfortunately for the last stylebender, he came up short after being taken down and controlled, handing him the first L of his professional career. Still undefeated in middleweight, Izzy would move back down and put together 3 straight title victories over Marvin Vettori, Robert Whittaker in the rematch, and Jared Cannonier, before facing off against his arch-nemesis, Alex Pereira, who held 2 victories over him from the kickboxing days, including a vicious knockout. The fight was looking like a standard Izzy points victory, when a late rally saw Pereira lock in a standing TKO stoppage. Adesanya would get a sweet redemption in the immediate rematch, but then unexpectedly lost his next bout to Sean Strickland of all people. It seems like Adesanya is taking some well-earned time away from the sport, but still remains a prominent figure in the community. Number 5, Frank Shamrock. Or, if you're going by his birth name, Frank Alicio Juarez III. Shamrock was a pioneering figure of the sport, seeing great success through the late 1990s and early 2000s. It all began in December 1997 when he faced Kevin Jackson for the light heavyweight title, which saw him win via first-round armbar. His first title defense would come against Igor Zinoviev that he won 22 seconds into the first round by knockout, proving he had the hands to go with the ground game. After taking out John Loba with a first-round sub, he'd face off against the Huntington Beach bad boy, Tito Ortiz. This was considered one of the most significant fights in UFC history at the time, about which Shamrock would also finish, this time coming late into the 4th round by TKO. Frank would later leave the UFC and explore other promotions, going 4-3 in his next 7 before retiring. Regardless, his legend will forever live on as a true wrecking machine. Number 4, Valentina Shevchenko. After losing her first title attempt in a close and controversial decision against Amanda Nunes, in which opinions were divided, just over a year later, following a move down to flyweight, she'd realize her dreams after defeating Joanna Jędrzejczyk by unanimous decision. This would mark the beginning of a historic title run, which put her strongly in the GOAT conversation, alongside familial rival Amanda Nunes. Spanning just over 4 years, featuring 8 successful championship bouts, Shevchenko would clean out the division, claiming notable names such as Jessica Ai, Liz Carmouche, Caitlin Chukagan, Jennifer Maia, Jessica Andrade, Lauren Murphy, and Tyler Santos. We never really saw any chinks in the armor until she faced off against the then 19-1 Tyler Santos, who gave her a real run for her money. In some moments, it seemed like Santos was pulling away with the victory, but an unfortunate clash of heads would severely compromise Tyler's performance, leading to another Valentina victory. It would all come to an unexpected end in her next bout, which saw her face Mexico's Alexa Grasso. After facing some adversity, Shevchenko was seemingly on a route to a standard win, when a failed spinning back kick gave Grasso a window of opportunity. opportunity, in which she capitalized, jumped on the back, and locked in a fourth-round rear naked choke submission. Forcing the tap, the immediate rematch would be a controversial one that ended in a draw, where one judge gave Grasso an unwarranted 10-8 round that ultimately led to Shevchenko missing out on the victory she'd really earned on the scorecards. Number 3. George St-Pierre. Canada's golden boy, George "Rush" St-Pierre, took the mixed martial arts world by storm, racking up an impressive 7-0 record before receiving his first title shot. He'd come up against surging Matt Hughes, who, as mentioned earlier in this list, would win via armbar with 1 second to go in the first round. Bouncing back with a solid 5-fight win streak, his second attempt at gold would be against the same man who turned him away the first time, Matt Hughes. However, this bout would play out a little differently, with George dominating his way to a second-round TKO. In arguably the biggest upset in UFC history, to everyone's surprise, George would lose his next fight in devastating fashion to Ultimate Fighter winner Matt Serra via first-round stoppage. Even Matt looked surprised. George would ultimately claim redemption against Serra and truly kick off his title reign. Over the next 10 years, St-Pierre would go undefeated, racking up 12 consecutive title victories. After the controversial Johnny Hendricks fight, in which many thought Hendricks won, George would retire, before eventually coming back 4 years later, upper weight division, to take the middleweight strap from the then champion, Michael Bisping. It's just a shame we never got to see that Habib fight. Number 2. Dominic Cruz. At one point in time, Dominic Cruz was on a 12-fight win streak, 7 of those being title victories, and was hailed the greatest bantamweight of all time. His only loss came by way of a guillotine choke to Uriah Faber back in 2007 under the WEC promotion, in which Faber was the reigning champ. A fair few of his title competitors were from the Sacramento-based team Alpha Male, where, slowly but surely, Cruz was taking out the whole squad.
The two guys that wanted to be alpha males, there can only be one.
After claiming notable names such as Demetrius Johnson, TJ Dillashaw, Joseph Benavidez, and Uriah Faber in 2 more rematches, his reign would finally come to an end when Alpha Male's last hope pulled through with a masterclass for the ages. Then undefeated, Cody Garbrandt would give Dominic a 5-round schooling, ultimately cracking the puzzle. After a long layoff, Cruz would return to the cage, going 2-2 in his next 4, his most recent loss being a nasty KO out of the hands of Marlon Vera. Despite a relatively inconsistent last few years, his legacy will always live on as one of the bantamweight GOATs. Number 1. Anderson Silva. Perhaps the best middleweight of all time, Anderson Silva would dominate the division from 2006 to 2012, racking up 17 straight wins, 16 of those coming in the UFC, making it the most consecutive wins in the promotion's history, which still stands to this day, a record that would have been tied by Kamaru Usman if he'd survived the last minute of his fight against Leon Edwards without getting head kick KO'd. Not only was Anderson getting W's, he was doing it in emphatic fashion. Known mostly for his slick striking, Silva produced a highlight reel like none other, with some of his most impressive KOs coming over opponents such as Forrest Griffin, Victor Belfort, and James Irvin, as well as nasty submissions over guys like Chael Sonnen and Dan Henderson. After having his win streak snapped by All-American Chris Weidman, Anderson's career would never really return to the success it once had. Regardless, Silva has already etched his legacy in the history books and will always be in the middleweight GOAT conversation. And that just about wraps it up for today's video. Were there any you think should have made it to the list? Let us know in the comments and we'll be sure to include them in part 2. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe and head kick the bell icon to never miss a new upload. I'm George, and until next time, see ya!